When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless. The timing of this gospel text couldn't be more appropriate. Our screens have been filled for the last couple of weeks with images of people, both crowds and individuals, who have been harassed, who are tired of being helpless. Crowds of people who have also had compassion on those who have been harassed and are tired of feeling helpless, who are ready to help bring about change. You know, I was wrong. Last week in my sermon, I said that if the officer had let George Floyd breathe that day, none of this would have ever happened. I was wrong. If it didn't happen that day, there would have been another day, unfortunately. There are clearly many people in our country who are in pain. All people need to listen, understand, grow, and change. Every one of us, no matter who we are, who we know, or what we've done. There's not a single one of us who knows it all. We need to know what we don't know. We need to be open and be willing to see those we don't see and hear about the experience of others. When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. This past week, I had the opportunity in a class, along with 19 others, to be a part of a listening group on gender violence. The females in the group shared their personal stories of genderism and gender violence, while the males listened. When all the females had spoken, the men reflected back what they'd heard. And then the next day, the males told their personal stories of genderism and gender violence, while the females listened. Likewise, when the men were done, the women reflected upon what they'd heard. The third day, an honoring ceremony was held to acknowledge the pain that was shared, to ask forgiveness on behalf of a culture that has allowed those things to happen, to make a commitment to make changes for the better, and to celebrate each other and our partnerships together. It was a powerful time for every person to be listened to realize there were others who shared our experiences, to hear personal experiences of pain that were beyond what one could ever even possibly imagine. Though none in the group were directly responsible for the pain of anyone else there, it was incredibly healing to hear the other group confess the ways they had been complicit in a culture that allowed such things to happen, and to be asked for forgiveness, and to hear their commitment to be a part of making change so that it never happens again. All of us came away changed, and while not completely healed, of course, deep healing had occurred. Compassion. That's the key to this gospel. And it's the good news that Jesus sends the disciples out with. The gospel is not that Jesus died for their sins and rose again. They know nothing of that at this point in the story. The gospel is this: the kingdom of God has come near enough to see you, to hear you, and to move among you such that your hunger, your fear, your diseases, and even your death cease, and life is given. Jesus sees you. Jesus sees us. He hears our pain and he knows our pain. And Jesus is overwhelmed with compassion for us. Jesus wants to send us out to do the same, to bring an end to hunger, fear, sickness, and death. But we need compassion for others. We need to see them, to listen to them, to understand their pain, to learn and reflect on what we can do differently to make a new life for others, for ourselves, and for our children, and for this nation. Concrete things like policies and laws need to be changed, but also, as well, mindset, culture, and new ways of thinking. No one knows everything. No one has all the answers. None of us are without sin. All of us have had a part in the violence others have experienced, as racism or gender violence or other kinds of violence. As Lutherans, we confess that we are both saint and sinner, and Romans reminds us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, loved by God and called into a new creation. This is nothing new. We can admit we've sinned and been in a state of sin, in thought, word, and deed, in what we have done and what we have left undone. There is a lot of work to be done, and thanks be to God that there are many who are willing to help bring in the harvest. Will you be a part of the work that needs to be done? We have time on our hands like never before and may never have again. Will you commit to being open, to listening, to learning, to being a helpful part of the conversation toward newness, to bearing the gospel to the world in the way you live your life, to bear the gospel with every word you choose to speak and write? May compassion so move you that you are to God a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. May your response be as the Israelites were. Everything that the Lord has spoken, we will do. May others cry out with joy because of you. The kingdom of heaven has come near to me.